All right, so thank you again, guys, for joining in for the masterclass session. My name is Akhil Bansal, and probably you guys have seen my photo over the advertisement or on the landing page through which you have registered yourself. So with me, I also have my partner, my co-founder Vishal Sethi here today.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Tarun. Tarun is the business development manager at Knowledgenic.
Hey, hi everyone. We would love to see your all faces. Can you please put on your cameras? Hi Manoj. Hi Ankush. Hey, hi Venkatesh. Hi Prem. Anidita. Hello. Gautam. Gopi.
Hey, good to see all of you guys. Really nice. Shrikala, hello. Hi. All right, so moving ahead, I'll talk a little bit about what Knowledgenic is before we jump down into talking more technical stuff. So Knowledgenic is an organization which was established in 2021. And in this almost an year of the completion, we have attained the ISTQB affiliation for our training division. And we have already reached out on the global front, wherein we are teaching students not only just from India, but then we have students coming in from US, Canada, Singapore, Australia. So every new batch, there is a new country, there is a new flag that gets added to our slides. So this is really great about how we have started. And talking about who we are, so we are three co-founders. One is myself, my name is Akhil, as I just mentioned. With me, I have Vishal, and then there is another co-founder, his name is Nimit. And individually, we all have almost 20 years of experience of the IT industry, and most of it had been most of the experience that we all have attained is working with some of the brands that you see on the screen here. But then this is not just limited to these six companies, but then we have a lot of other companies with whom we have worked for. So talking again about Knowledgenic, so Knowledgenic is actually operating in three different departments. The first department, of course, is the managed testing services. This is through which we are already providing our testing services to a number of clients worldwide, wherein we have our teams. A lot of projects are being run, managed in this particular testing department. The second department is, of course, of the software training services. And then the third is about the manpower consulting. So talking specifically about the software training services that we provide, so we are providing training services in QA and dev areas. And all of the trainers that we have in any of the training programs that you see with us are like about 15 years or 12 years of experience. So these are just a few of the tools or the logos that you see here that we use, that we teach during our courses. But we're not limiting ourselves just to the QA and the dev side of it, but we are also providing trainings in DevOps, in business analyst, Jira admin, and these courses, the number of the courses, the name of the courses also keeps adding on month by month. So we are moving very quick on adding more new courses as per the demand of the market. And today, specifically, since we are here to talk about software testing, so these are the topics that we are going to cover in our session today. So first is the thing that we all want to know, or we all probably know, is what software testing is all about, and then why is it even necessary to test an application before putting it into the market? What are the different levels, types, and techniques of software testing? Then how do we write a test case? How do we compose and log a defect? Talking about agile, we would be seeing what are the different scrum roles, what would be this different scrum flow that you can follow while you're using a scrum board for your project. Then we would be talking about the introduction of API, database, and automation testing. And then we'll talk about the various testing streams that one can choose in when you are into software testing. So not wasting any further time, jumping right into the core of it. So the first thing and the definition that I always ask to my students is how they want to define software testing is. And the common answer that I get from everybody, probably you guys may be thinking of the same in your minds, is to find defects, is to find bugs, is to find flaws in the application. Though you are correct in your own sense, but then over the experience that I have attained in the market, I would like to define software testing in these two different statements. The first one is that as when you're testing an application as a software tester, what you need to ensure is that your application is meeting the client's requirement. So the client gives you the requirement, and based upon the client requirement, the developer will develop an application. And as a QA, you need to ensure that the application that is developed is according to the requirement that the client has given. So this is one of the major things that we define, and as a QA, you have to follow when you're working in a software industry. And the second application as a QA, the things that you would do on day-to-day basis is to ensure that you are able to break the application. Definitely finding bugs is a part of breaking the application. That is how you would be able to find bugs. But to me, these are the two definitions that you can put into defining the software testing. And then why exactly is software testing necessary? Why not just develop the software and put it into the market? So we have had a lot of scenarios wherein software testing was completely neglected, and then there were huge losses that the companies had to bear. And that is the reason why over the period of last 2 or 3 decades, we have seen a very high demand of software testing happening in the industry. So these are a few of those important points why software testing is very necessary and why software testing is being followed religiously in all the projects that you would see running out there in the industry. The first one is talking about the security. So as an end user, as an end user of, let's say, of Facebook, I know that there is a lot of personal data that is stored in Facebook. And recently we heard about the breach that happened from the Facebook side, through which they were selling the data of all their customers to Britannica. So that is something that would, as an end user, that would be troubling me. So as an end user, I need to ensure that my personal data, my data with the related to the banking side of it, my credit card information that is saved on all of these applications is very secure. So that becomes the first and the foremost point why software testing is very necessary. The second being cost effectiveness. As an end user, if I'm going in purchasing a paid software, as an end user, I would ensure I want that the product that I'm purchasing, I should be getting the equivalent ROI out of this particular product. And at the same time, if the client is putting in the money to develop and to test that particular application, even the productivity that the client would be expecting has to match to the money that the client is putting into getting that application developed. So cost effectiveness becomes the second important point why we would say software testing is of utmost importance. Then talking about the product quality, and product quality is something that each and every one of us is very, very adamant into. So I'll take an example of going in and purchasing something on Amazon. And if the product quality of Amazon itself, the application itself is not good, you probably would not even waste 10 seconds of your time, and you would switch on from Amazon to probably to Flipkart or to Snapdeal or to some other platform. So with the product quality that you get as a customer, your customer satisfaction also increases. If you're not happy purchasing any of your products from Amazon, as a customer, you won't be satisfied with that particular quality. So you quickly will be jumping out of that particular platform onto a different platform. So these are the 3 major points why software testing is really important in the IT industry. All right, talking about the levels of testing. So when you get down into testing an application, there are 2 different types of testing that you look at. The first one being the functional testing, wherein you are actually testing the application based on the business requirements given to you by the client. So this type of testing would include unit testing, integration, system testing, and other types of functional testing, which are directly tied with the business requirements that are received from the client side. However, on the non-functional side of testing, what we are going to test is the behavior of the application. So which would include the performance testing, which would include the security testing of the application. So these are the 2 broad levels how we can categorize the testing that we perform. Talking about the different types of testing, I would first like to tell you guys that when you are starting to develop an application, it is not that you develop the application in one single unit or all the features of the application in one single go. What you do is you break down the whole application, the whole set of requirement into small chunks, which are known as units. So to depict that particular unit, the yellow box here is a single unit that we see here. And when a developer has completed developing a unit, the first first type of testing that as a QA we perform is known as the unit testing. So unit testing is to test each and every individual unit of an application is what you know as unit testing. So there would be a number of units that would be developed, and testing all of these units individually is known as unit testing. And once we have all the units developed, what we start doing is to integrate these units so that we can make bigger chunks out of the integration of these units into itself. So when you integrate smaller units into bigger chunks, all of the testing that you do at that particular point of time is known as your integration testing. And once you have all the units integrated and the integration testing has been completed, and when you test the whole system as one single unit, wherein you test all the features that are present in the system, is known as system testing. And when you are testing the flows right from the start to the end of the application, right from logging in into the application, doing the activity that this particular application is intended to do, and then logging out of the application. So there would be n number of scenarios that you can apply on the end-to-end testing side of it. But when you do this end-to-end testing so that you cover all the features, all the flows of the application, that is known as end-to-end testing. And when the application has been developed completely, and then you test out this application on different mobile devices, different laptops, different operating systems, different browsers, so that you ensure that the end users who are going to use your application, irrespective of the device that they are using, irrespective of the OS or the browser that they are going to use, our application is going to work perfectly fine on all of these particular devices that they have. So this is known as compatibility testing. All right, so moving ahead, talking about the performance testing, we all normally do that. So whenever you launch a website, if the site loads really slow, how you saw this animation do here, it loaded very slowly. So that is how you would say that the application is not performing that well. It is very slow how it loads. It is not responding that quickly. So that is all covered under the performance testing. And then under performance testing, performance testing in itself is a very vast field wherein you would be doing load testing, stress testing, volume testing. A lot of testing would go into doing performance testing, so that you ensure that the application that you deliver to the client is fast. It is as per the standards that is defined in the industry, and the pages should be loading very quickly. The video should be playing very smoothly and whatnot. So that all covers under performance testing. And then there is a lot of content that we see on the applications that is displayed. So testing that content specifically is what goes under content testing. So here you can see on the screen that we have a few spelling mistakes which are highlighted here in the red. And then there are a few words which are actually popping out of the screen. So they are not wrapping according to the screen size. So that this is these are a couple examples that would tell you what content testing would mean. Moving ahead, if I have to say that if I have to give you a scenario that as a QA, I have tested a feature. I've tested this particular box that you see in orange, and I found a defect in this particular feature. I report that defect to the developer. The developer goes in and makes some fixes in the code, and he tells me that the defect is now fixed. So what I have to go in and do now is known as retesting, when I would be specifically testing the box, the unit which had the defect. So when I do specific testing related to the feature that was buggy last time, so that is what is retesting. However, when I have to go in and test all the related features to that particular unit, that is what is known as regression testing. When you are testing the related features along with the feature that was buggy. So that is what is known as regression testing. All right, so moving ahead in the process of software development, software testing, we now come to a point wherein the developers have developed a lot of features, and from the QA side, you have completed a lot of testing. Now, before you put the application into production, you again want to do a second round of tests just to ensure that everything is working fine. So what you do is you just cherry pick a few of those features that you feel like may probably still have some bugs in it. So when you're when you're going in and cherry picking those particular features and you're testing those specific features is what is known as ad hoc testing. So there is no systematic approach that you follow while you do ad hoc testing. It is just a random approach. You can just jump down into any of the functionality of your choice or any of the functionality that was showing a lot of defects. So it is completely up to the tester how they want to go in and do the ad hoc testing. It is very random kind of a testing that you perform on the application which has developed all the units in itself. And talking about the sanity testing, so what happens is that the QA gets a build after every deployment or after every new piece of code that the developers have written. So sanity testing is something that ensures that the build on which the QA is going to make their testing, perform the testing, should be working perfectly fine. So this is one example here that depicts that I'm trying to launch an application, but as soon as I launch it, it is automatically going down. So as a QA, when the application is not stable, if I'm not able to even launch the application, if I'm not even able to log in into the application, if the application is not stable, if it is crashing every 5 minutes, there is no way that I can go ahead and I can start doing my testing. So sanity testing is testing the application, whether the application is stable, whether the application is sane enough for the QA people to even start their testing or not. So that is what comes under sanity testing. All right, so the last type of testing before you put down your application into production is the UAT testing, which is also known as the user acceptance testing. So what typically happens, or what we know, is that the client gives us the requirements. The client wants us to build the application based upon this requirement. The developers build these requirements. The testers have tested all these requirements, and our application is all good now. So before we hand over the application to the client, there would be a checklist that the client is going to go through. So this checklist would be a high level test cases that the client is going to execute on all of the features that have been developed. And when the client finds that all the features are developed perfectly fine and it passes all of the test cases or all of the checklist that the client has in the user acceptance testing, so they would give us a go ahead. They will tell us that we are good, we can go and put this application down into production now, so that the end users can come and start using this application. So that was about the types of testing that we generally see that we do in our routine project activity. Right. Now moving ahead, let's talk about the techniques of testing. Vishal, can I request you to take up these slides, please?
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Akhil. So guys, techniques of testing, as the name indicates, that it's basically we talk about what are the techniques that we use to perform a testing. Akhil talked about that, okay, why we perform a testing? There are various reasons we perform a testing. And one of the foremost and the most important reason is to make sure that whatever product or an application or a website that we are building is of an utmost quality and it meets the end user or the customer's demand. And in order to do that, we need to make sure as a tester that we test that application from an end user perspective and make sure that the application does not have any defects in it. So there are two kinds of techniques. One are the static techniques of testing. In a static techniques of testing, and the name suggests static, we do not have any workable software available with us for testing. It's not that there is an application, we go into an application, we launch that website and execute some test cases and test it, whether it is working fine in terms of functionality. No, it's not that. In static approach, we make sure that whatever artifacts are there in the application. When I say artifacts, those artifacts could be entity relationship diagrams, ER diagrams, your specification documents, your requirement documents. We review those requirement documents and we make sure that the requirements are documented properly. If requirements are not documented properly, we cannot, they will be developed incorrectly, and if they are developed incorrectly, there will be defects. So static testing approach is very important. It's an approach where we actually try to prevent the defects in an application. Then comes the dynamic testing techniques. In a dynamic testing technique is primarily divided into two techniques. One is white box testing technique and another one is black box testing. In a white box testing technique, the tester should have a knowledge of a programming or the coding, because in a white box testing technique, you test a smallest unit of an application in a form of programming. Let's say if a developer writes a program, and in that programs he writes a loop. I hope each one of you understand the loop, what loop is in a programming. So if a loop says that the loop is to be executed from 1 to 10, I is from 1 to 10, then the developer runs the loop for 2 or 3 inputs and make sure that the loop is running fine in the programming language. And that's what the white box testing is. So in general, manual testers do not perform the white box testing. Primarily, software developers used to perform the software white box testing, but nowadays you must have heard about a new role introduced in the industry called SDET, Software Development Engineer in Testing. So SDET are the people who are actually nowadays responsible for performing a white box testing as. But again, the manual testers do not do it. Then comes the other techniques of black box testing. Black box testers are the testers who do not need to have any knowledge of the language or the coding. So there are techniques. The most important and the popular technique is the boundary value analysis. Boundary value analysis, and the name suggests we test the application on one boundary. So if I give an example that if there is a website and that website accept a number, let's say from 1 to 10, or let's say a number in the age field from 1 to 18. So if you have to test that field in that application, you will test that field for, let's say, if you enter a number 1 and click on submit one, you will verify for number 1 it is accepting the value. For 18, you put the number 18 and you hit the submit button, it should accept. And on the 19, it should fail. So you just pick the boundary values, 18, 19, 1 and 0, 4 values where you will be testing the application for, because these are the items where application is supposed to fail. Then comes the equivalence class partitioning. Equivalence class partitioning is important when the data sets and the numbers are very, very high. So let's say if the data range is from 1 to 1000, you cannot test the application for each set of value. So you have to figure out that, okay, let's test it for 1, 2, 20, 100, 200, 300, 500, and then for 1000, 1001. Then comes the race condition. So race condition is when multiple people at the same time are trying to access a data or a particular feature of an application. Right? This happens normally when you go in Amazon for for any other e-commerce website for buying a mobile phone, and only one set of that mobile phone is available, and hundreds of people are trying to put that mobile phone in a cart. How application should behave in that case? Let's say if Akhil and I sent a request at the same time to the Amazon, and how should Amazon that to whose cart that mobile phone should go into? Akhil's cart or Vishal's cart? Right. So there are algorithms which are running behind, and based on those algorithms, these race conditions should be tested. Then comes the state transition. State transition is basically the classical example of state transition testing is in the banking domain. So let's say your bank account has 1000 rupee balance into it, and then there comes a request from your EMI, your home loan is running, and then those 1000 has been deducted, and now your balance in your bank account is 0. So the transition of your account has been happened here, right? Earlier you had 1000 balance, but now you have 0 balance in your account. So that's called a state transition. Your application, your account is going from one state to another state during testing. Then comes the error guessing. you can guess yourself. Error guessing comes with the experience of a tester. Once you are old enough in a software testing, let's say you are a seasoned software tester of 1 or 2 years in the industry, and you will be able to understand, okay, these are the areas where applications normally fail or break in terms of functionality. So instead of testing the whole application, you will directly pinpoint or test that particular area of an application where you believe that it will normally fail based on your experience. So that is called error guessing. So these are on a high level, the techniques of testing, which are very important when you perform a testing as a tester. All right, so the next thing is test case. You must have heard a lot about a test case. So test case is basically a set of inputs and a target. After executing those set of inputs, we try to test that what is it, whether the application or the particular functionality is working fine or not, right? So it's an organized way of testing an application. And just to let you know that we start writing the test cases even before we start we start developing the application, right? And when the application is developed, the test cases that we have written directly from the requirement, we start executing them in the application, and we'll start marking them pass and fail, and based on that we log a defect into it. So test case has a set format, and whenever we write a test case, we write the test case in that format only. And in that format, the major components of a test case are basically the test data and the test inputs, which are the steps, and then the expected results. So in this slide, if you see, how do we write a test case? So when we write a test case, there are two ways of writing a test case. One, you write a test case in an Excel sheet, and another, you write a test case in a tool. The popular tool for writing the test cases is called TestRail. It's a test case management tool, very popular in the industry. So when you write a test case in an Excel sheet, the components that you use for writing a test case, the very first component is test case ID. So you must be wondering that why there is a test case ID. Test case ID is important because when you write 1,000 of test cases for hundreds of functionalities in an application, how would you track the test cases? In order for you to manage and track test cases better, we use the test case IDs. And when we write the test cases in an Excel sheet, we set a naming convention and follow that naming convention to create a test case ID. When we use a tool for writing the test cases, the test case ID is automatically created by the tool itself, let's say in a test trail. Then comes the test description. Test description is a very high level description of what you are going to test through this test case. Then comes a prerequisite. Prerequisite is what is it that you need beforehand to execute a particular test case. Then comes the input and actions. Input and actions are basically the steps that you follow to execute a test case. I'll illustrate it with one example. Let's say you are trying to test the login functionality of a website. And one positive test case, please remember, one positive test case for testing a login functionality is enter a valid username and password and click on login button, right? So in this case, if you go by the test case components, the test case ID will be login 001. I mean, you can give your own convention. Then test description. Test description is high level summary. What is it that you're trying to test through this application, through this test case? User is able to log in successfully using valid credentials. So please, I'm emphasizing more on the word called valid. So valid means valid, somebody who is already registered in the application and has a valid username and password. So then comes the prerequisite. So prerequisite, in order for us to execute this test case, we want to put a valid username and password in the username and password field, and then we'll hit the login button. So from where do we get this valid username and password? We first have to get ourselves registered in that website and get a username and password created. So the prerequisite for this particular test case would be that we have a valid login credentials, or the user has already been registered on this website and has valid login credentials. Then comes the steps. Look at the steps very keenly. That launch a URL, the first step. So when we write a steps, it is very important, guys, that we write a step such that so anyone, even a person who doesn't even know the application, should be able to execute a test case by just following the steps that you have written. So launch a URL, enter a valid username and password in the login screen, enter a valid password, and click on the login button. What should be the expected result? The expected result for this would be user is logged into the application. See in the next slide. So this is the expected result. And expected result, when you execute this test case, what is the actual outcome you receive? If the actual result matches with the expected result, everything is all right, no problem, bingo, pass. But if your actual result, when you executed the test case in an application, if your actual result is different from the expected result, then you found a defect, and you have to log that defect to the developer to get that fixed. So actual result, so the expected result should be when you provide a valid username and password, the expected result should be you should be logged into application. But if you are not logged into application after providing the valid name and user password, then it means there is a defect, and you have to report that defect in either a bug tracking tool or directly to the developer in an Excel sheet, whatever method that company is following to report the defect. So that's why test cases are very important, and they are, so just to give you a summary, test cases are written before the application is built, and test cases are executed as soon as the workable software is available. Whenever a test case fails, which means the expected result is not matching with the actual result, it means you found a defect, and you have to report that defect in a bug tracking. Okay. All right, Akhil. Next slide. Thank you so much. All right. So this is basically a glimpse of how do we write a test case in a test trail. So I mentioned you that there are two ways of writing the test cases, documenting the test cases. One is in the Excel sheet, and another is in the tool. So Excel sheet, you create the columns as per the test components. One is for test case ID, one is for description, one is for steps, and one is for expected result. But in test trail, you get a ready-made format here. So if you have a look at this screen, which is on your desktop right now, right, you see that there are preconditions or the prerequisite. And in the prerequisite, what we are following the same test case that I gave an example in the previous slide, that verify that, so this is the summary of test case. Verify that user is able to log into the application using valid permission. So you provided the summary here. If you have a look at this number C2248, it is actually a test case ID that has all automatically generated by this tool called test trail, right? Then come down, you will see the precondition. Precondition is basically a prerequisite, and precondition is user is already registered on the application and has valid credentials. Then comes the steps. Launch application URL, enter a valid username and password, enter valid password, and then click on login button. After clicking on login button, there is an expected result, and then the actual result. So expected result is user should be able to log into the application. So in this tool, when you execute this test case, it gives you an option, a text box to enter the actual result and mark the test case as pass and fail. right? So that's a different scenario. That's another case. Execution. So we'll cover it. We cannot cover it in the interest of time. But this is how a test case look like in a test rail tool. All right. So the next is, sorry. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, when a test case fails, which means you found a defect. Bingo. That's what we are hired for as a software tester. If we are not finding a defect, we are not useful at all. So if a test case fails, which is a matter of joy for us being a tester. So if a test case fails, which means we found a defect, and we found a defect, we cannot leave it as it is. What is the next thing that we need to do if we find a defect? The next thing is we need to get that fixed. We cannot let that defect go into the product and to the customer as is. We have to get it fixed. So if we have to get it fixed, who does fix a bug? A developer. And how would developer get to know that there is a defect? We have to communicate that to a developer. And in order for us to communicate a defect to a developer, we need to compose a defect in a well-format manner. And again, for reporting a defect, there are some a set format for reporting a defect. Now you must be wondering that there was a test case ID earlier, and again there is a bug ID. Why bug ID? Guys, when we test an application, we could log hundreds or thousands of defects. If it is a big application like Amazon, we may end up logging thousands of defects. How would you track your defects? Right? So you need to have a bug ID to track your defects, right? And normally the most popular tool that is being used in the industry, 99% of the companies nowadays are using that tool called Jira. You all must have heard this name, Jira, J-I-R-A, right? So Jira is the tool which is used for logging a defect. In Jira, when you click on a button called create a defect, you see a bug ID automatically created for the defect. And then similar to your test case, you write a defect headline. Headline is very high level summary of a defect, so that those who don't have a time to get into the description, they should be able to understand the defect just by writing or reading the test case only. The bug headline only. I'm sorry, let me share my screen. All right. Just give me a moment. I don't know, for some reason screen share was stopped.
I think that was an issue from my side. I had a
okay, I shared my screen. All right, so this is how we compose a defect. So the headline here, you see login, user is able to log in using valid credentials. Unable to log in, so unable is the key. So even if a user is providing a valid username and password, he is not able to log in into the application. That's a defect. So somebody who will be reading this headline only will be able to understand what this defect is all about. Then comes the description, environment. So environment is very important. So let's say if it is a web application, then you need to mention the browser. There are what happens sometimes. There is a defect which is happening on Microsoft Edge browser, but the same functionality is working fine in Chrome browser. So it is very important whenever you log a defect, you mention the operating system and the browser on which you were running the application when you found the defect, and the version of that browser also. Because there may be a case if somebody who is using Chrome 91, there is not a defect for him. For Chrome 91, that defect is working fine. So that's why environment is very important to mention, so that developer could reproduce the defect that you have logged. Preconditions in this case are none. Then steps to reproduce. The steps to reproduce remain very much similar to normally with your test case, because you are performing the same steps. So launch the URL, enter valid username in the username field, enter password, click on login button. After you click the login button, what happens? So actual result, what actually happens after you click on the login button? User is not able to log in into the application using valid credentials. This happened, and this is not the expected. What we were expecting, user should successfully log into the application using valid credentials. This should happen, but this didn't happen. That's why it is a defect. Expected did not meet with the actual, and that's why it is a defect. So we log this defect as a high priority. Why it is a high priority defect? It is a high priority defect because if somebody is not able to log into the application, how would a person will experience or use the application? So it's a complete failure of an application. It's a very high priority defect. It should be fixed right now. We have to fix it without any further delay. So that's why it is high priority. If there is a defect which can wait, which is not an urgency, if there is a spelling mistake in an application, that can wait. We can fix it later. We can fix it tomorrow or day after, whenever a developer gets a bandwidth. But this defect we cannot leave even for half an hour to as is. We have to get it fixed. That's why priority of this defect is high. All right. Then comes how to compose a defect, the status. So when you report a defect, the status of that defect comes as new, and reporter, in the reporter field, you need to enter the, that normally picks automatically when you log in into the Jira application. It picks your name from the username and password that you use to log in into the application. Assignee, in assignee, it normally happens not automatically, but if it does not happen automatically, sometimes you select an assignee developer from the drop-down list, right? So state, you must be wondering what state is, right? So when you log a defect, it goes into a new state, right? Then your lead or somebody reviews your defect and he mark this defect as an open and assign it to the developer. Then developer fixes that defect and return it to you for regression. And then you perform a regression testing. If a defect is fixed, you close it. And if a defect is not fixed, you assign it back to the developer for refixing. That's a whole bug life cycle. This is how a bug, take a birth and then dies. All right. So this is a screenshot of a defect which is logged into Jira. So once you log a defect in Jira, this is how a defect look like. So if you see this breadcrumb trail where I have my mouse pointer, the project for which we have logged this defect is Knowledgenic test batch. It could be Amazon or whatever project that you are working on. Then QTBA6 is a defect ID. This is a summary or the headline of a defect. Then this is an environment, precondition, steps to reproduce, and then actual result. On the right side in this pane, you are seeing assignee is unassigned. So this defect has not been assigned to anyone yet, but normally you see a name of a developer here in assignee who is supposed to fix this defect, and reporter is your name because you have reported this defect. So this is how a defect look like in a typical Jira application when you log it in. All right, so this next slide is around Agile and Scrum. So we have our safe Agilist, Mr. Akhil Bansal here, who will take it up from here.
Right, sure, Vishal. Can you please stop sharing your screen so I can share mine?
Sure. Doing it right now.
Okay, let me put my screen into presentation mode. Right. I hope you guys are able to see my screen. Okay, Tarun, Vishal, please confirm because I put others on mute right now.
Yes, Akhil. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. So guys, we have been talking about how we test, what are the different levels of testing and whatnot. But when you actually get down into developing an application, there is a process that you have to follow. And then for that particular thing, you have a number of SDLC models. If you have heard about it, waterfall model, V model, spiral model. So there are a number of models that one can choose from, and accordingly they can start developing their project in that particular model. But nowadays, if you see, what we hear the most being used in the industry is agile. So 90% of the applications that are developed right now from scratch are using agile methodology to develop their application. So when I just said that term, you should have heard about me calling agile a methodology, because of the reason that this agile in itself comes in from a manifesto that is not specifically related to the IT industry. Actually, agile came into existence from the non-IT industry, and when people started seeing the advantages of agile in the non-IT industry, that was the point when they thought of putting up using the agile methodology into IT industry as well. So agile methodology is something that is used to discover the requirements that a client would have to develop that application, then find solutions, find improvements to that particular requirement that the client has. And all of this is done by having a collaborative effort between the self-organizing teams as well as the cross-functional teams that you have in a team, that you have in a project. So the cross-functional team would mean that you have people from the development side, you will have people from the design side, from the QA side, from the deployment side. So there would be a lot of teams who have to collaborate effectively so that the application that we're developing is a successful application. And when we put down into the market, it is a success. So when we are talking about the agile methodology actually tells us that we can use a number of frameworks. Scrum is one of those frameworks, but then it is not limited just to Scrum, but there are a number of frameworks like Kanban is one, extreme programming. Then you can even go into using Lean. So there are a number of frameworks that you have available, and depending upon what framework suits best to the project needs, you can select one of those frameworks. However, again, Scrum is something that is very popular and in high demand. So Scrum is a framework that is used to develop, deliver, and sustain projects in the development phase. And Scrum is generally used to develop projects which are of medium to high complexity. So that is a very quick definition of what Agile and Scrum is. And specifically talking about the various roles that you see in any Scrum team are only 3 roles here. So the product owner is the person who would be talking with the client on a daily basis, a number of times, in fact, to get the requirements from the client. And then he passes on all of those requirements in a very non-technical format to the Scrum Master. So Scrum Master is a role that you can relate more of to a QA manager or a team manager or a development manager that you normally typically see in any of those teams. But the Scrum Master here is a person who is a facilitator, who is a servant leader for his team. So the Scrum Master will be telling to the team how to accomplish a given task, not helping them to write that piece of code, not helping them to write the test case or to execute that particular test case, but Scrum Master is a person who would be telling them how to do things so that you are able to achieve an output out of that particular step. And then the third role that you see here is a Scrum team. So Scrum team is a team who would have developers, who would have the QA folks, who would have the designers, the people who are responsible to deploy your application onto the live servers. So all of those roles would come under one single umbrella, which is known as a Scrum team. So typically, theoretically asking, if you're sitting for any interview, so these are the 3 roles that are there in any that are there in the Scrum framework that we follow. All right, so this is a Scrum flow. And if you guys have done a little search on the internet, or if you have a little idea, so this is a typical diagram that you would have seen in different colors or different shapes. So this is the flow that you follow when you are using a Scrum approach in your project. So the product backlog essentially would have all the requirements that are going to be developed for your application. It would be in some way you can relate it to the storeroom that we guys have in our houses, where we keep a lot of stuff, and we are at some point of time going to use it. If not in near future, probably down the line, 6 months down the line, we're probably going to pick up something from that particular store and we're going to use it. But we know for sure that this is something that is available with us and we can use it. So you can relate product backlog to a storeroom that you have in your houses. So product backlog would have all the requirements that are going to be developed for the application stored in itself. So during the sprint planning meeting, we go to the product backlog, pick up the items that we are going to plan, that we are planning to build in the next 2 weeks, in the coming future. So that is how you pick up and put those stories, those requirements from the product backlog into your sprint backlog. So sprint backlog is essentially the items or the requirements or the features that we're going to develop, test in the next coming 2 weeks or 3 weeks of time. So if you have a big bag of sugar in your storeroom, which is stored in the product backlog, you probably would not keep all of that sugar in your kitchen. So if you have a 50 kgs bag in the storeroom, you are going to just pick up like half kg or 1 kg of that sugar and put that down into a sugar jar and keep it in the kitchen. So in similar way, the sprint backlog would only have those requirements, only have those user stories, which we are going to develop in the coming few days. And then when we have selected those user stories in the sprint backlog, and then when the team starts developing and testing these stories, we do mention the duration in which we are going to accomplish all of these stories and then accomplish the goal of that particular sprint. So generally it is a 2 weeks to 3 weeks of time that we take to complete the selected stories. And during this time period of 2 to 3 weeks of time, we do a daily scrum. This is also known as daily stand-up meeting. So this is the meeting wherein you go in and talk about the things that you have done from the previous day, things that you're planning to do to the next day, and if there are any impediments, issues, you discuss that with the team. So this is a very quick meeting. The reason it is known as a daily stand-up is for the reason that it is a time-boxed meeting, and it should actually not go beyond any time beyond like 10 to 15 minutes. So literally people should stand up, and when they are standing up, they probably would be hurting themselves standing for long. So that is the reason why we say that this is a 10 to 15 minutes meeting only, and where we discuss the progress that the team is doing on a daily basis. So at the end of the sprint, at the end of this time period that we have defined for ourselves, probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we will have an incremented version of the product that we are building. So there is something that we have already built in this time period of 2 to 3 weeks, and we can show this thing to the client. So that is what happens in the sprint review. So we review in the sprint review, what we review is what we have planned. Have we actually developed what we have planned in the sprint planning meeting in this particular sprint? And then if yes, we definitely have made something. So this is very good. Why not let's show it to the client? Let's do a demo to the client. And from this particular demo, we will get a feedback from the client whether what we have built in the last 2 or 3 weeks of time, is it something that the client is actually looking forward to or not? So if the client is not happy with what we have progressed or what we have built, so the client would give us a feedback right in that particular demo meeting itself, and we can take up that feedback and implement those new changes as user stories or as new requirements, put them into the product backlog so that we can pick up those learnings from the demo that we had to the client in our upcoming sprints. So this is how we take the feedback from the customer, from the client, and this feedback that we get in this particular complete scrum flow is on a frequency of like every 2 to 4 weeks. So we don't have to wait for the entire project to be developed and then go and showcase what we have developed and then take the feedback from the client. Rather, we are taking this feedback at very quick intervals, so that whatever changes the client wants us to do for the app in the application, we can do it very quickly. So that is what is done in the sprint review and the demo to the client. And then we have a sprint retrospective meeting. So this is an internal meeting. The client is not involved in this particular meeting. This meeting is also known as what went wrong or what went right meeting. So everybody in the team would discuss on the things which really went well in the whole sprint, and we should continue using these processes in our next sprints. And then people also talk about things which we can improve upon in the upcoming sprints. So these are the learnings that we take away from the current sprint, and we try to implement those learnings in our next sprints. So this is a workflow that keeps happening. You'll follow this workflow day in, day out until all of the product backlog user items, user stories have been completed. And we have a product now, not an increment, but we have a product which is completely developed, and we are now done with, since we are done with all the product backlog items, we are good to say that we have completed this particular project. Right. So this is a typical flow of how you work in a Scrum on a daily basis. And to manage all of this work that I just told you on the last slide, you use there are a number of project management tools which provides us the Scrum board. So Jira again is a very good tool through which you can do all of this project management. The user stories, the features that I was talking about that we have to develop, that we have to build, are represented in the form of cards here. So each card that you see here is an individual user story, is an individual feature in itself. So there are a number of columns which you can decide upon, design accordingly, according to the needs of your project that you want to. And these cards will then be just picked up from one column and passed on to the next column. You can assign these cards to the developers, to the testers, so everybody knows at any given point of time, if anybody comes to this particular Scrum board, they would know exactly where we are in the project. And if they have to make any changes as a Scrum Master or as a client or as a product owner, they can do that accordingly. If they want to bump up the priority of a given user story, they can talk to the Scrum Master and they can increase the priority, and everybody would be then focusing on that particular user story. So in short, Scrum board is a project management tool that is used to manage all the user stories, all the development and the testing work that is carried out in an agile framework, in an agile methodology. Right, so that was about agile. Talking about APIs, so API is an acronym for application programming interface. So this is a mechanism through which you can connect between two applications or two components or two computer hardware devices. So here in the diagram, if you see, we have the UI, wherein this is known as the presentation layer, and we have the database, which is known as the data layer. And then these two components are linked through the business logic. So this is the business logic layer that is making this communication possible between the UI and the data. So whatever testing you would be carrying out on this particular area is what is known as the API testing. So when you get down into doing API testing, there would be another term that you would hear very commonly, which is known as the web services. So web service is a method of communication, and it is also an API. So web service is a communication method between two electronic devices. And the point to note here is that this communication happens over a network, usually HTTP or HTTPS. So any of the websites that you see having this protocol of HTTP or HTTPS, it's actually a web service that you're probably using, your application is pointing to. However, APIs are the interfaces, as I was explaining it in the previous slide. So APIs are the interfaces that would ensure that one application can communicate with another application, and that is the standard way of how we see components talking to each other in an application. So there are different types of web services that are built by the developers. So at one point of time, way back in like 2006-7, SOAP, the Simple Object Access Protocol. So this was a web service that was really popular at that particular time. But then due to the limitations that SOAP had, people came up with more new ideas, and then came REST. So REST is the most advanced web service at this point of time, and this is the highly used web service. If I talk about right now of what web service we have to go and develop. And then there are a lot of methods through which you can communicate with the APIs. These are the four most commonly heard and used methods: the get, post, put, delete. But then there are a lot of other methods as well, and it totally depends upon what web service, what API. As an API tester, you are testing. You should know what method you are going to use. Then the APIs are written down in different ways. There are different content types in which you have to recognize, you should have the application recognize your API. So it could be JSON, it could be XML, or it could be in a URL encoded form, which is very similar to what is used in the RESTful web services. So a very quick example of how a web service would look like. So any URL that you see or traverse through on a daily basis, if you really break down the URL or the web services, it would be broken down into four different four different parts here. So the first one, as I was talking about, is the protocol. It is either the HTTP or the HTTPS protocol on which you are doing the whole communication. Then you will have the server path. So it would define exactly what server you are going to hit. Is it the openweathermap.org, the example that we are taking here, or is it the Google server, or is it the Facebook server or the Amazon server? So whatever API that you are going to use, that server path is going to point to that particular server address. And then the endpoint, exactly on that particular server, what folder your data is stored in. So that is what is going to be defined through the endpoint. And once you have reached the endpoint, what is it that you are querying from that particular server path and from that particular endpoint that you want to be displayed to the end user. So in our example here, what we are trying to do is to fetch the data for London location. So what we are doing here is we are talking on the HTTPS protocol, which is a secured network, and we are going on the openweathermap.org server. Once we have reached this particular server, we want our request to go down into the data and then to 2.5 and then the weather subfolders in a way, which is the endpoint where we know we would be able to go and fetch in our data, our temperature, our weather for the London location. So once we are at the endpoint here at this particular subfolder here, then our querying parameter will tell that you have to go in and search for data that belongs to the location which is known as London. And the mode in which you have to represent this data is going to be HTML. And this is the application ID through which the client is requesting this particular, this whole weather. So this is how you are able to go in and fetch data for the location of your choice. So when you, as an API tester, when you get down into testing APIs, you will have all of these APIs with you, the list of the APIs which have been developed by the developers. And as a tester, what you would be doing is querying all of these APIs using a tool. And through those queries that you run for these APIs, you are going to get a response which you again match with what your developers have already given to you. So to execute this whole API testing, you have a lot of tools. And what we show you here is a very popular tool known as Postman, which is free. It is an open source tool. Even you guys can go in onto your browsers to postman.com. You can use the online version as well as you can download Postman on your system and you can start using it right away. So here, what you see is that I have used the protocol HTTPS. This is the server path that I want to go to, then the endpoint here, and then we have the querying parameter. So what I'm going to do, what I'm trying to test here is I want to fetch the results that are stored on page number 2 on this particular server path and this particular endpoint. So when I have this query, then when I have this API with me, when I send this request to this particular server, I get a response here. So as a tester, what I have to now do is match this particular response to the response that my developers have given to me. If the request that if the response that I get versus the developers, or what developers have given me, if they match, I'm all good. If in case my response does not have some section of it, what my developers have told me it should have, so in that case, if there is a mismatch, the same thing that what we were talking about in the test cases, if there is a mismatch between the actual versus the expected, what I know as a tester is I found a defect. So for these cases, I again have to go down into the defect tracking tool and log a defect for the same, so that the developers can make a fix for that particular issue. Once the developers have fixed the issue, I can go back and I can retest that particular API all over again. Right. So this is how API works. And using Postman, you can even do manual. You can test the APIs manually, or even you can automate these APIs. However, in case if your project tells you that you have to automate the APIs, generally you would not be using Postman, but then you would be using Selenium along with the RESTful web services that I was talking about, and through that you can achieve the API automation as well. All right, talking more about automation. So this is something that is really interesting and a step further than what we normally say, a step more than what you would be doing in comparison to manually testing your application. So what you would be doing in automation testing is you are going to write test scripts, probably in Java or in Python language, so that through these test scripts, your application would be able to do the testing, process the testing of your application. So through these test scripts, what we achieve is efficiency. So we save a lot of time and money, wherein you have to go and manually test out each and every test case yourself, versus you are telling your application, your tool, something which is known as Selenium, the most popularly known tool again, to go in and execute all the test scripts that you have written down and save a lot of time for you. And once you have the test scripts written down, probably like thousands of test scripts, so you can run all of these test scripts in collection. So you can run each feature wise test collection. So you can run all the test cases which are pertaining to the login feature. You can run down all the test cases which pertain to the reporting section probably. So you have that ability to select what test cases you have to run. And since these are running in an automated fashion, you don't have to sit down and see how the test cases are running. Whatever you have coded into your programming language, the results would be given to you in an automated fashion. So after the test run or the collection has run, so you will know how many test cases have been executed, how many of them failed, how many of them passed, and you can even go a little further. And for all the failed test cases, you can also tell the tool or write test scripts in a way that it would go down and log your defects in Jira. So it would tell you the result. The report will tell you that out of these test cases that have failed, I have gone in and logged these defects with these IDs in Jira. So even you can go down and do all of these in your probably in the tool that you select. And Selenium is a very popular tool, freeware, open source, which is used for this purpose. Then on the assertions, you can apply assertions so that you don't have to manually check whether the test case is being passed or being failed. And from your assertions that you apply on the test scripts directly, you can know whether the application, whether the test case is a pass or a failure. So benefits that we see coming out of the automation is that you will get increased productivity, since what you are doing is now not done in a manual fashion but in an automated fashion. Your test results would be very accurate, since you are not manually doing it, rather the tool is doing it for you. The quality that you would achieve out of the complete test execution is going to be high. The performance increase comes in from the productivity that you see from the QA side of it. So definitely, since you are not doing it manually, and you are having the tool do it instead, so you would have an increased performance. The investment over a longer period of time is definitely going to become low. So in comparison to the manual testing, if you have a manual testing team, you probably may be having 7 to 8 manual testers in your team. But if you are talking about the automation testers, you probably may reduce the team to like having 2 to 3 automation testers in your team. You'll always have the availability of the test script. So the faster availability is another benefit that you see coming from automation. You will have faster execution times. The results that you see coming out of the automation test script would be really high. So these are some of the benefits that you draw out of using automation testing. Right. Moving further, talking about the database testing. So to understand what database testing is, that all of the servers that you are interacting with on a daily basis, so there is a lot of data that is stored on these servers. For instance, if you're talking about Facebook, so you post a lot of photos, videos from the recent trip, a recent holiday that you have had. So how is the data being saved in the servers is what you are going to test when you are doing database testing. So you test for tables, you test for schemas, triggers on the database itself. So you test for data integrity and its consistency. So how do you even test that? By writing simple to complex queries on the database. So these queries could be in the form of SQL queries that you write on the database, so that you validate that the data that you have put into the database, it really even exists there. If it does not even exist, if I'm uploading a photo on Facebook and I see that my friends are not able to see the photo that I have uploaded. So it means that my photo is not getting saved onto the database. It probably may mean that. All right. So first and the foremost check that you're going to make is that you validate whether the data even exists or not on the database. Then you validate for the correctness of the data. So the photo that you have uploaded or any of the entries that you have made to the database. So you verify whether the data that I entered from the UI is even stored correctly or not in the database. Then you check for the completeness of the data, whether the data that I have stored, if I have uploaded a file of like, let's say 1 GB on the database, whether the file has been uploaded completely or not. Has it truncated some of my, for some of the characters or some of the numbers or some of the photos that I had in my 1 GB file. So you would check for the completeness of the data that you have uploaded in the database. All right, so that was a very high level discussion on how you would do database testing. But then there are again tools like Workbench and many more that you use to actually accomplish this particular activity of doing database testing. But Vishal, can you take over from here, please? I'm giving you the slide control as well, Vishal.
All right. Thank you, Akhil. Just give me a moment. Okay. So thank you, Akhil, for talking about all types of testing, API, and other automation. So guys, so, as we understand that in development, there are n number of options we get. We can get into, development architect. We can get into different technologies which are there. I mean, C, C#, React, Node.js, Java. We have so many languages and technology out there where we can build our career into. Similarly, in testing, we have so many streams available. It's not that when it comes to testing, there is a myth that okay, software testing is one option, one way to build a career into. But now, that's not the case. Software testing is also very, very diversified and dynamic field nowadays. You can build your career as a software manual tester. You can get into automation. Automation also, you can get into web automation. You can get into mobile automation. You can get into process automation, RPA. Then you can get into a performance testing that completely into the tools called Load Runner. And then JMeter is an open source tool, which is very popular nowadays. You can build your career into API testing and the API automation. API is nowadays, is in a boom for the reason that every application, every mobile app that you are building, you are using somehow the API from some other applications. So very, very, very classical example of an API is whenever you install an app in your mobile phone, and when you launch an app for the first time, it gives you an option whether you can log into that application from your Facebook or from your Google or a Gmail account. How does that happen? Earlier in the older days, you have to create your registration, you have to enter the registration form, and then you have to create your username and password. But now it's simple like this. If you have a Gmail account, if you have a Facebook account, you just select an option, click on a Facebook, use my Facebook account. The authentication happens through an API. The new application that you have installed, it gets your authentication done through the API of Facebook that they have opened for you. And this is going to happen with every application. That's why the market of an API testing is huge, and it's going to be, grow enormously in the future. Then comes the database. Database is an evergreen type of testing. Data is the key. Every company out there, be it Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they're thriving to get as huge data as they can collect of each user in the world, because that's what they are going to play around with the data. Then comes the accessibility testing is very important. Not in our countries for now, but if you go into developed countries like United States of America and European countries, The accessibility testing is of foremost importance for the reason they have made it mandatory in their countries. There are laws. Section 508 compliance is mandatory in United States of America, which says that every individual, even if those who are visually disabled or are specially abled people, should have an equal right to access an application with access a content or information which is available on internet. And in order for them to make that information accessible, the applications are built such that they cater to the accessible features into it, accessibility features. So currently it is on very high demand in United States and other countries, but very soon you will start seeing this in this the requirement of this accessibility testing in India also, because there are a lot of initiatives which are going around. The initiative that government has started called Divyang initiative. You know, all government applications of India are to be made accessible by the end of 2024. That's a target set by the government. So imagine the requirement that is going to surge in an accessibility testing going forward. Content testing, of course, is a I would suggest it's a type of testing where you would not see a much of growth in terms of a monetary and the technical side of it, but of course it's again an evergreen testing where you can get into and make some money. Then comes the mobile app testing. Mobile app testing is again it has a huge scope, because I think 5 years down the line you won't hardly see people using the desktop applications. Everything will move into the mobile phone. So mobile app application is again a very important field for all individuals to build their career into. So in a nutshell, testing is no more a taboo career for the engineers. It's a very dynamic career, and people can choose from a variety of options that are some of the options which are listed in front of you in this slide, and can build their career as per their interest. Somebody who has an interest in performance testing, go into performance. Security testing is not listed here. That is again a very niche technology and the area where you can build your career into. So this is about the streams, and then so this is how actually we help at QAgenic. We just gave you the glimpse of what software testing is, the basic idea of what are the types of testing. We touched upon the concepts on a very high level. But if you want to get into the detail, we offer a very detailed course in the field of not only the software testing, but in other areas also. So these are some flavors and the courses that we offer, the detailed courses that we offer at QAgenic. And Tarun, after this session, will share the list of the courses that we offer at QAgenic. So you can choose if you want to build your career in software testing, you can choose the one from the list, and you can reach out to us, and we can then guide you further.
Yeah, and furthermore to that, these are the flavors that we know from the industry experience, that these are the most popular flavors. But it may happen that for your own benefit, if you think like if you have to mix and match some other programs into one flavor, so definitely even we are open for that. You can even do that. We would enroll you into 2 different batches, and we can have you pursue the flavor of your own choice.
Thank you, Akhil, for adding that. So guys, you must be wondering that there are thousands of institutes out there, and they are teaching software testing. What is it that QAgenic is doing differently, right? So we are different for the reason that first of all, we are not an institution, right? It's not that we are teaching you something and we are going away. We are an organization who provide a training on the software testing, automation testing, on the different concepts. And these trainings are planned in such a manner that these trainings land you directly into a job. For the reason, we give you an opportunity to work on the live project. So if you do a 1-month course with QAgenic, it's not that you learn all theory. No, that's not the case. We put you in the live projects, and after 1 month of a course is done with the QAgenic, you will have an experience of, I would say, which is very much equivalent to 6 months experienced guy who is working somewhere as a manual tester, for the reason that you get an exposure to work on the live project, which are there in our organization for our active clients. We provide you a real-time experience on the tools like Jira, Postman, Trello, and TestRails. Because if you appear in an interview, most of you must have already been appeared in some of the interviews, and based on your experience, you can figure out that the very first thing that people want in the industry, your exposure to the tool. So in our case, we have these tools purchased. We provide you an experience directly on these tools. You will be writing defects right from the second week of your training in a tool called Jira. It's not only the theory and the technology and the processes that we teach. We always take care of the other things, which is based on our experience. We have prepared sessions where we teach you that how to crack an interview, how to prepare well yourself for a professional world that you are planning to get into, how you should write and compose an email, what should be your behavior when you are into a professional world or in a corporate world, how you should reach out to your colleagues or your seniors in an organization, what are the etiquettes that you should use when you are communicating verbally and through the different channels, professional channels which are there in the corporate world, Teams, Slack, and there are other channels which are available. How to write a good and effective email. So we also help in these areas as well. And it's not that your course is done and we abandon you, right? So our trainers, our support staff, our executives in the HR, they continue to support you unless and until you find yourself a place in this professional world, in this corporate world. Then even after, it's not that your training is done, you are hired somewhere and okay, our relationship is done. It's not that. Even when you are hired somewhere, we provide you an on-job support also. Let's say if you're hired somewhere and your project manager asks you that, okay, I'm putting you in a new project which is altogether into a new domain, let's say travel domain, and now you are stuck. How would I handle the travel domain? I haven't already worked on a travel domain ever. Don't worry, you can come back to us. We'll guide you on that. What is it that you should take care of when you test an application which belongs to a travel domain? If you need some test cases, templates that we provide to you. If you need a template to create a test plan, what happened with me when I joined the industry. 3 months after my training, I got a task from my manager that create a test plan. I was just 3 months old. I mean, not as in age, but 3 months old in the software testing engineer. And I was given a responsibility to create a test plan. And back in 2003, guys, Google Waban was not there, right? So it was a very difficult task for me. I went from here to there, reached out to my seniors, got a test plan arranged. And I understand the pain that I went through at that time. And we are trying to address that pain for you all. So if you come across if you face any similar difficulty when you are into your professional world, don't worry, we'll have your back. And then the other thing is, we will get your preparation done through the mock interviews. We'll help you in preparing your CVs professionally, and we'll help you with the interview etiquettes. Mock interviews happen. It's not that we take one mock interview and it's done. No, We'll provide you feedback, and we'll continue to take your interviews until we find you, well prepared to, face the end customer or the interview in the organizations. So, these are some of the points that make QAgenic different from others, and you can experience it for yourself. If you want, you can visit our YouTube channel. Tarun will share the link of our YouTube channel after this session is over. You can see the testimonials of our folks. Okay, so this is small numbers which speak for us. There are, so far, since we have established and started QAgenic, 1,267 candidates applied for the training, and we shortlisted 1,051 for the reason that it's not that everyone who applies, we take them in. Because when we say that we are giving you a job guarantee, we are giving you a kind of guarantee that if you will do fairly well in the training, we will definitely land you in a job. So in that case, we will have to do a little kind of screening so that we have right people in the training itself. So 1,267 people applied. We shortlisted 1,051. Then out of 1,051, we have already got placed 983 students, which is 93.5%. I won't say 100%, but 93.5% is a significant number. How we could achieve a pretty good number of 93.5%, for the reason it's not that we are randomly going to anybody out there. We are going to TCS, we are going to IBM, we are going to Adobe Systems and asking them, okay, hire our folks. It's not like that. We have some partner companies, and few of the partner companies are listed here on your screen. It's a very organized way we conduct these things, this training. We take a requirement from these partner companies first, and when we create a batch of yours, we make sure that we teach you such a way that the requirement of these clients are covered in the training itself. So when you face the interview with these companies, you are already prepared. You are not getting any surprises there. The questions that you are seeing there are not something which is out of syllabus, jaise hota tha in the 10th or 12th class. Out of syllabus aa gaya tha question. No, it's not like that. You are prepared in such a manner that whatever question you will come across, you will see, you will face in the interview, you will have that background, you will have that study done in the training itself, and you will be prepared for it. That's the reason our hiring rate is 93.5%, guys. So you can have a look. These are, of course, there are big names: Qualitest, QInfotech, UpLogic. These are Amantia. These are some very big names in the industry in terms of software testing domain. But again, even these smaller companies, they have very good rate of hiring folks, and very good growth they are giving to their employees. All right, thank you so much everyone for being a wonderful audience. We appreciate your patience, and we thoroughly enjoyed the session. You all make a great audience, and thank you. Goodbye from my side.
And wish you all the very best for your futures. Stay connected through the various channels that we have available for you guys.